I mean, you think about why this government exists. It's to do things collectively we can't do as individuals.
Future mayor of San Francisco, Mark Farrell.
Mark's on the podcast to talk about how San Francisco was great and make it better.
I believe we need to focus on those table stakes issues of public safety and clean streets. And when I say clean streets, I mean specifically around our homeless issue in San Francisco and then the drug crisis that we have on the streets as well. To me, those are just fundamental basic issues city government should be focused on to begin with. To me, it's about being honest where we sit, and only when we're honest about where we are today can we truly build for a sustainable future that we can all be excited about. I think everything is there for the taking. We are still the city of San Francisco. We still have everything going for us. We just need to change the leadership inside of City Hall to really realize that vision of San Francisco.
What's up, everybody? This is Simon. On this episode of The Ideal Hour, I have the future mayor of San Francisco potentially coming on, fingers crossed, Mark Farrell. Mark's on the podcast to talk about how San Francisco was great, how he's going to make it great and make it better. As a resident of San Francisco and the Bay Area for over 30 years, I've seen it change from the tech boom to the .com crash, you name it. And today, San Francisco is not what it was before. I've made videos on my YouTube channel of the homelessness problems, the drug problems, the housing costs, etc. And those videos have gotten hundreds of thousands of views. So I'm happy, Mark, you're on here to talk about what you could do for San Francisco.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's first share some statistics here, okay? San Francisco was a place. I own several properties in San Francisco. I'm lucky enough to invest. I don't come from money where my dad, bestowed a lot of money, sadly. But I was able to invest in San Francisco. And through that, I was always prideful to say, hey, I own a property in San Francisco. I own homes here. I live here. I enjoy this area. And it's become to a point where if you tell someone that's outside of the state or even in the state that you're from San Francisco, they go, oh God, where? They ask this weird question of this is no longer a thing you should be proud about. Does that feeling resonate with the people you meet on the streets all the time?
Oh, 100%. It's certainly been my lived experience as well the last few years. For work outside of City Hall, I've been running our investment firm for since 2009 with my partners and travel extensively, both nationally and abroad. And literally for the past 2+ years, before this, you travel, you'd say from San Francisco, boy, that was met with awe and envy. How lucky, boy, I want to visit there. It's my favorite city in the world, sentiment like that. And from the Middle East all the way to Albuquerque, New Mexico, I've literally had people over the last year say, what's wrong? What are you doing there? Like, what's the problem? And, that is not a good thing. We shouldn't, stick our head in the sand and say, hey, our reputation is fine. The reality is it's taken a massive hit, again, nationally and abroad. And as you think about so many things that we do, pride of our city, the conditions on the streets when we live here or work here, but certainly as it affects tourism and, the desire and the need to revitalize our economy, those things have real impacts. And that's part of the thing that we need to change in a very major way.
Completely agree. Not that you care what anyone thinks, but you've seen the beauty of San Francisco, where it was and where it can still be. Just some statistics. With COVID and these policies under the current administration with London Breed, downtown is deserted. We're talking 30+% vacancy according to my numbers here, 37% it looks like. So it's a place where you used to be able to go, you would feel safe, you could shop. And when my wife or my family wants to go eat somewhere in that area, they used to have great restaurants. We're worried. We always pick a different destination. And the reason being is safety. And half the stores are closed. What are some of the things that this administration missed to not allow businesses to thrive, and how will you change that?
Yeah, look, let's set the stage. Everybody in the world went through COVID. And it was not a fun time. People handled it in different ways. I don't have specific qualms about the way San Francisco handled it, but the reality is it's no longer an excuse to how you are doing as a city, whether it be through the lens of public safety or street conditions or your economy. And the reality is right now in the United States, San Francisco ranks dead last in economic recovery post-COVID. Our tourism levels are below where they were pre-COVID. Our commercial vacancy rate downtown is pushing 40%. I mean, it's more than double what the nearest kind of U.S. city is experiencing in a negative sense. So again, nothing to be proud of here. I think Mayor Breed has overseen the steepest decline in our city's history over the last few years. And the reason I'm running for mayor is to bring our city back. Actually, I should say more importantly, move our city forward. Let's turn the page on the last few years of totally failed leadership inside of City Hall. Let's write a different chapter for San Francisco, a chapter we can all be proud of, where our economy is humming once again, where safety and street conditions are just table stakes issues within city government. And we have thriving neighborhoods, which, look, from my perspective, as someone who's lucky enough to grow up here in San Francisco, the neighborhoods are what make our city unique. And, whether you like to hang out in the Castro or North Beach or the Mission or, the Outer Sunset, whatever floats your boat is cool. But the reality is those neighborhoods make our city what it is. And all of our neighborhoods are struggling as well. So we need to bring that back in a massive fashion, and happy to talk through with you how we get there, what we do to get there, and the opportunity actually that also exists in front of us today.
And to your point, Mark, it's a 2-point thing here. First, with companies, they were enticed to do business in San Francisco in the past. I mean, there was tax credits. It was a welcoming community for businesses. And it seems like for some reason that has never recovered. It's in fact, a lot of companies are discouraged. You've got Nordstrom shutting down, Old Navy left, Whole Foods, you got Meta, Twitter, they're all downsizing their office space. I think San Francisco has one of the largest vacancies in square feet office space out there. But what that also affects is the small businesses that I've seen around those areas, the food trucks, the sandwich shops on the Embarcadero or on Montgomery Street and so forth in between those buildings. We got to bring that back, and we have to make sure that the city once again thrives. But what do you suggest? How would you propose to businesses to start returning without overstepping your position with the companies and their decisions?
Sure. So, look, first of all, I believe we need to focus on those table stakes issues of public safety and clean streets. And when I say clean streets, I mean specifically around our homeless issue in San Francisco and then the drug crisis that we have on the streets as well. To me, those are just fundamental basic issues city government should be focused on to begin with. Those are the areas, to be quite frank, that I believe Mayor Breed has failed at the most in San Francisco over the past few years, certainly since COVID. You focus on those core issues, what comes back first? Think about conventions. Conventions never left San Francisco because we lost our natural beauty as a city, because we lost some of these iconic neighborhoods that conventioneers used to love to visit. I mean, think about Chinatown, somewhat adjacent to the convention center in walkable distance, one of the most iconic cities in the world. People used to love visiting there, but the reality is they were getting threatened, if not assaulted, from the Moscone Center, which is our convention center, to their hotels. And at some point, CEOs of these companies have a duty of care for their employees, and they pulled ripcord on San Francisco and left to Vegas and other more benign places. You focus on those table stakes issues with an aggressive mayor courting these companies again, we will bring conventions back. And conventions literally allow restaurants and hotels downtown to be open and thriving year round. The buyouts that exist for restaurants during these times, the ADRs that hotels can charge. This is super real and very practical and pragmatic about the business outlook and atmosphere downtown. But those, again, to me, are table stakes issues. Then we need to focus on tax incentives to bring employers back to the downtown and South of Market cores. I think you alluded to it a little bit earlier, but we did that in the mid-2010s during my time in City Hall. And, the mid-market area was thriving during that time. And it was a neighborhood that was really in rough shape before we instituted this tax incentive. brought that forward legislatively. Twitter became a little bit of an unfortunate poster child because it allowed some people to kind of malign the tech industry writ large for a lot of San Francisco's woes. But the reality is, to your point as well, small businesses were being created and starting to thrive in this neighborhood. Employers were coming in droves. This was a good thing for San Francisco. And, a sad last, footnote to that story, X, let's leave Elon Musk out of this conversation, but X just left about a month ago, not to go to Florida or to Texas with some kind of tax havens that we're probably not going to be able to compete with. They went down the road to Palo Alto because their employees were getting assaulted from their vehicles on the way into the office. It's not something to be proud of as a city. But again, from my perspective, it also represents an opportunity for what the next mayor can come in and truly fix. And really start to make a difference in San Francisco residents' lives. But then as I think about our economy writ large, those are the table stakes issues we need to focus on. Get back to tax incentives in the downtown South of Market core. I also think downtown, if we're going to be honest about it, the amount of square footage of office space that exists today and the vacancy rates, it's going to take way too long to fill all of that office space, certainly with the work from home environment. Whether that's full-time or just Fridays, and we'll see how that settles out. And that'll be, I think, very different by company. We need to focus on the conversion from commercial to residential downtown as well. I think we have an opportunity to build a truly new neighborhood. You think about Wall Street in the 80s in New York City, ghost town on the weekends. Now they convert over 20 million square feet of office space to residential. It's one of the hipper parts of New York City all week long. We have that opportunity, as grim as it is today, to build that future in downtown and south of Market, where we have a safe, clean environment where people are working, but also living 24/7. And that to me is a really exciting vision to get forward with.
It will actually revitalize that whole area if that's done. I mean, I would see permitting would be kind of a restriction of making sure it's fire code or whatever. But it would revitalize it. It would bring people, restaurants and so forth. And that's what I think it needs. And to your point, Mark, San Francisco on the weekends, especially in that downtown area, was always dead as well. You're either on the Embarcadero or you're there during the weekend working. And those mom and pop shops we talked about earlier would be also closed during the weekends because no one was working during that time. So that would be cool if they do that. Thank you for sharing that. Let's talk about crime. I mean, I trained jiu-jitsu at Ralph Gracie in San Francisco. You were there. That's how I said, hey, let me reach out to Mark. Unfortunately, I had a staph infection and couldn't be there that day, but I'm over that. But even in that area, that corridor, needles are still on the streets. It's not a place I know you have children. It's not a place where I would want my kids to walk around. It's gotten out of hand where even myself, who feels like I could defend myself in a weird situation, it's still unsafe. How do we turn these policies that Mayor Breed supported, which was defund the police? I think the city is somewhere around 400 officers under-policed right now. And there was budget cuts in 2020. Mayor Breed cut $120 million from the police. How do we get police back on the streets? I was just in New York. I felt safer in New York walking around with my 3 kids, and mind you, the oldest is 9, than I ever have in San Francisco, or I should say than I have in San Francisco the last 5 years or so. How do we bring that back?
Look, great question. And to me, let me be very clear. I believe public safety is the number one issue and the number one thing that government should provide to our residents. I mean, you think about, why does government exist? It's to do things collectively we can't do as individuals. Safety is the number one thing. And you're right, Mayor Breed has totally failed on it and has not had a commitment to public safety since she got into office. And it's very personal for me as well. My grandfather was a police officer in New York City. My dad, when I grew up, he was in the military. He was an Air Force pilot. Like, to me, serving in a public safety capacity is really important and ingrained in my DNA. And so much so that when I was in office before, and I've been out of City Hall for the last 6 years, but when I was in office before, I was budget chair, partnered with Mayor Lee for 4 years. And then when I became mayor, when he passed away, and we grew our police department to record staffing levels, had over 2,300 officers in our police department. The police department is now down 600 officers since I left in 6 years, which means that the police department itself as a whole is down about 25%, been eviscerated since I left. What that also means, though, is in all of our district stations, so the ones that essentially are in our different neighborhoods throughout the city, you're down about 40% staffing levels because we have a kind of a fixed asset, centralized staffing model with police headquarters. Really impacts our daily lives. And it impacts the police officers' ability to respond to calls for service, to let alone be proactive in our neighborhoods. And I think we all envision what policing should be is ultimately enough of a presence so that you're deterring crime from happening to begin with. And we are very far away from that. So to me, what do we do about that? And to your point, Mayor Breed defunded the police department 3 years ago. And has overseen staffing levels go down like this, and has overseen a police commission and appointed her police commissioners where they're running roughshod over the police officers and their ability to do their jobs on the streets of our city. Not a commitment to public safety at all. And you have to parse through some kind of election year, ethics that she's trying to do right now to make up for that. So what do we do about it? Look, number one, I do believe we need a new police chief. I think Chief Scott's a good man. I've worked with him before, family man. But the reality is, average tenure of a police chief in the U.S. is 3 years. He's been here for over 8. As of today, he's already the longest serving police chief in the last 50 years in the city of San Francisco. And the reality is, as much as he is a good guy on a personal level, he rode side saddle with Mayor Breed when it was defunded, when police staffing's down, when they can't recruit. I want a different police chief to fight with me for the next phase of our police department, where we're refunding our police department, where we're growing staffing levels, where we're enabling officers to do their job on the streets of our city. That is a different profile of person. Second of all, we need to fully fund our police department. We hit that home a little bit here, but that to me, again, is just so misplaced and misguided politics. I think coming with the wave of the time in the post-George Floyd era, which obviously was a tragic incident, in and of itself, but also kind of as we think about our communities and our neighbors and parts of our population throughout America, is something we really needed to pay attention to. Defunding was the wrong answer. Agreed. And we led on that in San Francisco. And then lastly, we have to fully grow our police department to record staffing levels again. Again, we need enough of a police presence, not because we want to arrest our way out of this situation. I mean, this can be part of it for a while, but we want enough of a police presence and a reputation where we will make these arrests so crime doesn't happen on our streets in the volume that is happening today. And by the way, for me, it affects us that live in the city, affects people that do business in the city, whether you own an apartment, whether you have a small business in one of our commercial corridors, or have a big business downtown or South Market. But it's also about visitors and tourism. And, we cannot pretend that those Louis Vuitton videos from 2-3 years ago had a dramatic impact on the city of San Francisco's reputation and tourism. And now the 49er shooting the other week in a very similar vein. Yeah. Unfortunately, thank goodness he's okay. But that has an impact. And if you don't think so, we're sticking our heads in the sand. And so to me, it's about being honest where we sit. And only when we're honest about where we are today can we truly build for a sustainable future that we can all be excited about. I think everything is there for the taking. We are still the city of San Francisco. We still have everything going for us. We just need a change of leadership inside of City Hall to really realize that vision of San Francisco.
Completely agree with you, Mark. Thank you for sharing that. I will say, and I will add to that, in jiu-jitsu, there's a lot of police officers that do training, that I do train with and so forth. And sometimes I ask them, I say, what's going on? I think the police have to be given the ability to fight the crime, even if it's a petty crime, or at least stop someone without fearing that they're going to lose their job or fearing that there's going to be some type of repercussion towards them or their family. Not saying you go out and you do things that we've seen that are not acceptable out there, of course. You still got to be respectful and mindful. But, in the city where police officers just a common conversation I would have with them, they would feel frustrated that they are not given the green light to do that job with this current administration, and I hope that changes. Let's talk about the drugs. My God, when I grew up, and I'm 41 now, but as I mentioned, I've been to San Francisco since 91. The drugs have exploded. It used to be marijuana. Now it's gotten I don't even know what the latest thing is, but
Fentanyl.
Yeah, fentanyl.
It's owning our streets.
Yep. And it's everywhere, and it's scary. How do you, and it obviously affects the tourism you mentioned, which is a big part of it. It affects the citizens that are paying taxes and so forth. How can we stop the drugs being distributed on these corners on 9th Street, on 6th Street, in the Tenderloin and some of these other areas that are, you could clearly see open drug distribution or even open drug use, but particular distribution?
Yeah, look, it's the right question, and it's affecting us dramatically in our neighborhoods, in particular the Tenderloin neighborhood, south of Market's been bleeding into the Mission as well. I mean, it's really impacting. But again, to our earlier kind of dialogue around our reputation as well. I mean, let's not pretend that the GOP on a national level, given this presidential campaign, is using the city of San Francisco and these neighborhoods as punching bags to poke against Kamala Harris, and that is unfortunate. So, let's evaluate what's going on. Fentanyl is what has taken over the drugs and the drug scene in San Francisco. And City Hall's approach is completely failing because literally we are using harm reduction as a concept, as the central theory on how to kind of prosecute against the drug crisis on our streets. And to me, with fentanyl, harm reduction is a little bit like oil and water. It could be part of the solution on the periphery, but to me, we need to focus on getting people off the streets, getting connected with services, and give them a chance at something different in life. As opposed to City Hall's approach right now, no joke, Mayor Breed is funding nonprofit organizations on a daily basis to go through the Tenderloin with shopping carts, handing out free packets of tinfoil and straws to people suffering from fentanyl addiction. I've witnessed this personally multiple times. People pick it up it's like free candy, pick it up, walk across the street, and unfortunately, it's a very telltale sign when someone's suffering from fentanyl addiction, that called the bends, and again, a very different, very addictive drug with dramatic effects. Kind of when you're not doing the drug itself, because fentanyl, you're taking a hit every hour and a half or 2 hours. It's not like these drugs from 10, 20, 30 years ago. And I've watched people pick up that free paraphernalia, walk across the street, smoke fentanyl, and pass out on the street corner. We are slowly allowing people to kill themselves on the streets of our city. We're breaking our own record every year for the number of drug overdose deaths on our streets. There's one hotel, 40 dead bodies were pulled out of that hotel last year alone in the Tenderloin.
Wow.
And from my perspective, it is inhumane, not progressive at all to allow this to continue to happen. I had an ER doctor come to one of my political events about 2 months ago now. He said, Mark, what people are not talking about is the fact that when they come into my ER, they are literally coming in with open wounds on their arms and their legs with necrosis. He said, this is cruelty getting masked as compassion, and we need to do it different. So my perspective is, and my North Star is, how do we save lives? How do we get people off the streets voluntarily or involuntarily, which will come with criticism, but I'm okay with that. Connect them with services and give them a chance at a different life to make a different decision with their own lives. We can do that, clean up our neighborhoods at the same time, and feel great about it from a policy perspective. It's not happening today. And I've been very public about declaring a fentanyl state of emergency as soon as I get into office. It allows us to ask the state and the feds for additional financial help. I think most importantly, allows us to ask the state and the feds for additional law enforcement help. As you think about the Tenderloin, think about south of Market, we are down about, again, 40% of our officers. We need help. And then also with the fentanyl state of emergency will allow us to build a centralized intake center, a place 24/7, centralized, more shelter capacity, services attached to it, where we can really have a dramatic effect when we get people off the streets. And again, give them that chance at a different life. That to me has to be the policy approach. It is so vastly different from what City Hall is doing today. Other cities are doing it to great effect, and I want to mimic that, but bring it home for the city of San Francisco.
And I think it's not a time for hurt feelings. You have to tackle the problem and understand who's convicting these crimes and who is at the cause of it. I will also say, by not doing anything or doing the same thing that's been done the last few years, you're not helping the users at all, whether, they're going to kill themselves by abusing these drugs. And more families are going to have to deal with the repercussions of their children or whoever part of their family is using. So something has to be done, and I'm glad you have a plan for that. I also wanted to talk about a law that got passed in San Francisco where it became a misdemeanor to steal, I think it's $950, correct me if I'm wrong, in this law. I know it gotten a lot of attention on all the news medias as to kind of make San Francisco seem like a city of thieves. But in reality, it's kind of like the broken window theory, right? If you have people that think it's okay to steal, they're going to steal until, they want to steal something better or bigger and so forth. Is that law going to stay in place? Has that law been effective in your mind, or has that law just encouraged thieves to ransack Louis Vuitton, maybe not get a purse, but get a wallet and so forth,
Yeah, look, so that what you're talking about is Prop 47. It's actually a state law.
A state law.
It was enacted a little over 10 years ago, and in my view, a completely failed experiment.
Okay.
And basically what you're talking about is the delineation line between what's a misdemeanor and a felony as you think about the dollar value of theft. And it went from $450, I believe, up to $950. And again, to your point, it is making it easier for people to commit crimes, less repercussions on the streets. It just makes no sense, certainly in my view, where we sit as a city of San Francisco and quite frankly, California. So there is actually a measure on the ballot this November. Again, another state law, state proposition, I should say. It's called Prop 36. And Prop 36 will reverse that out and bring it back to the prior levels. And I think a step in the right direction. I don't want to say it's a panacea by any means, but in my view, I want to give every police officer every tool in their tool shed possible to hold criminals accountable, to create a sense of public safety, once again, a sense of law and order on the streets of San Francisco in ways that don't exist today. And again, Prop 36, in my view, is a step in that direction, and I think the right policy move, without a doubt.
Thank you for sharing that. That's excellent. Now let's talk about homelessness and encampments, because that's a thing that plagues a lot of citizens, people that live in San Francisco that rent. Tourism, of course, is a big part of that as well. I personally, and I'll say it, and I'm against these encampments. I think they devalue property. They make it unpleasant to walk. I'm not saying I know the solution for it. It's not a good situation. I'm not the person in the position to talk about what the solution is. But I've seen it where I couldn't rent my own property. No one wanted to move into the area. The price of the real estate dropped, which is unlikely in San Francisco. If you own property in San Francisco, typically you have a retirement house, so to speak, right? Encampments, homelessness has gotten out of control. I think California is something like 30% of homelessness, majority in comparison to nationwide, and San Francisco supposedly still has about over 7,000 people that are homeless. It says 7,700, but you have more accurate facts. I know these people need help. A lot of them are mentally ill. They have drug problems. Some don't have the family support, which is very sad. And they go back into this hamster wheel of using and back on the streets. They have nowhere else to go. What is your take on this whole perspective? I mean, in one side, it makes the city look bad. On the other side, there's all these advocacy groups that will probably fight you on it. And, it's not humane to take someone or not let them stay there. How would you approach this situation to clean up the city?
Yeah, look, so homelessness, like the drug crisis, like public safety, one of the core issues facing us in San Francisco. And again, Mayor Breed's approach has completely failed our city. Homelessness is on the rise once again, and we need a different approach and a different leader inside of City Hall to tackle this issue. I will say from the get-go, there is no one silver bullet for the homeless situation in our city. It takes a myriad of policies working in conjunction together that I do believe will have a dramatic impact on the streets of our city. When I was mayor in 2018, I made a policy choice to clear out the large tent encampments in San Francisco. At the time, I don't know if you remember this, we were having these large tent encampments, kind of 30, 40, 50 strong, growing in different parts of our city, where, Seattle and other places were starting to provide them permanent homes and areas to be. I wanted to take a different tact. And so the policy we enacted was saying, listen, we're going to offer them shelter and housing, but if they say no, we're going to take their tent away. Because a few things. One, you cannot convince me that anybody's getting better sleeping in a tent at night on the streets of San Francisco. I mean, the health issues that exist, the crime issues that exist are off the charts. But also, I believe the sidewalks of our city belong to everybody. They belong to young families, they belong to the elderly, and not someone who's choosing to move to San Francisco, pitch a tent, and think that the city's going to leave them alone ad nauseum for as long as they want to be there. That is not the future of San Francisco that I believe in. And so when we did that, and the first time we encountered someone took a tent away, did it work? Sometimes they came in a shelter, sure. Sometimes did they move around the street corner? Did it kind of push it out a little bit? Sure. That happened too. But it was the second, third, and fourth time that we encountered this person. And by the way, I was only mayor for 6 months. And we did it consistently, though, every day on the streets of our city. And what happened by the end was people were coming in and converting into shelter with a greater velocity and percentage-wise, because we were just making it inconvenient for them to, stay and be left alone on our streets, or they were leaving the city of San Francisco. And you know what? At the end of the day, I would love to help everybody and solve everyone's underlying issues. But the reality is we do not have the financial resources, nor do we think philosophically it's fair to think everybody that moves to San Francisco, it becomes our obligation as a city to solve all of your underlying social issues. So if the fact that our policy created not an ideal environment for you to stay in tents at night, and therefore you left the city of San Francisco, I'm okay with that as well. Because ultimately I'm fighting for the residents of our city as in principle, and our neighborhoods. And what we saw was a dramatic effect in 6 months. And this mayor has taken a very hands-off approach. Over the last few years, there was a lawsuit, to your point about organizations, that was brought by the Coalition on Homelessness, really, preventing the city of San Francisco or accusing us of doing things around tenant encampments. A Ninth Circuit injunction ensued, then the Supreme Court came down, reversed that out over this past summer. But the reality was the mayor still had the power to do so much with tenant encampments and decided not to do anything. And now it's a very haphazard, ineffective approach on the streets of our city. It's not working. You need someone who's going to come in and care about this issue and be consistent. Again, be consistent about wanting to help people. Be consistent about offering shelter and housing, but also be consistent to say, okay, if you don't come into shelter or housing, then we're going to make it inconvenient for you to sleep on the streets of our city in tent encampments. Because I believe, we need to fight for the rest of San Francisco as well. That policy approach worked in the past. It will work again. And then we need to do, to my comment earlier, a lot of other things as well. There was a program that started well before I got into office called Project Homeward Bound, where we were, for people in San Francisco that were homeless, if we could find a loved one on the other end of the line that was willing to take that person in, we could legally give that person a bus ticket and meal money home. I did a study on that program when I was budget chair, and it turned out 70% of the people that we sent home through Project Homeward Bound, a year later, were still housed.
Wow. That's
Dramatic
incredible.
Success.
That's
incredible, right? For these human beings. And you think about the average cost at the time to treat somebody homeless on the streets of our city was over $28,000 a year. Bus ticket, meal money home was $500. It's a great success. I mean, homeless to being housed a year later, amazing. And so as budget chair, I quadrupled the budget for the program after we saw the success. And by the time I left office as mayor, we were sending over 100 people home a month on Project Homeward Bound. So you think of a numerator of about 5,000, the data's not perfect, by the way, unsheltered people a night in the city of San Francisco, that we were churning about 1,200 people home a year. It's a big deal. And because I was so closely associated with it, Mayor Breed essentially abandoned the program. I think last year around 200 people went home on it. And now, post kind of Grant's past decision of the Supreme Court, this mayor is just bussing people out. And while that might kind of scratch an itch some people have, it's the wrong policy approach, because you're not helping these people, which is obviously not the point of it. But also, you know what we're going to do? We're going to get into busing wars with the governors of the southern border states that are all Republicans, that are just going to be itching to send their busloads of people to San Francisco. Like, I don't understand that approach and the long game here. And so for me, I want to help people. We can do it effectively. We can do it very cost efficiently, but we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. We can work on programs and reinvent programs or reconstitute programs that worked in the past And I think we need to do exactly that. When you do that combined with the tenant encampment policy and so forth, you can have a dramatic effect on the homeless population in our city, both visibly on the streets, but also underlying where you're not seeing them as well.
Yeah, and to your point, Mark, I think it's consistency. I think if you have a consistent plan that either enables it or disables it, you're going to go in that direction. And I think if the city of San Francisco doesn't, and the leadership doesn't send a strong message that this is not okay, it just invites more people, invites other cities, as you mentioned, whether they're Democratic or Republican or whatever, it doesn't matter. It just invites people to come in thinking that they have a free ticket. This is a playground for it. And the truth is the playground should be meant for the kids out here in safety and so forth. It shouldn't be for adults that take advantage of the system is what really it can be. And some of these people, not all, but some of these people. So I appreciate you taking a stance on that. I think it will make San Francisco walkable. I mean, I've had personally, just to share, I've had people from business from China come down when I used to have a business there, and they would come in and I would tell them, don't turn left and go down the street to this direction of the hotel. Make sure you turn right and go to Powell Street and then walk up this way, et cetera. And it shouldn't be that. It shouldn't. San Francisco needs to get to the point again where people want to come here, right? They want to do business with us. They want to start businesses here and continue that future forward thinking. Let's talk a little bit about why you entered politics. I mean, you're a family man, a beautiful family. Congratulations. Why did you get into politics? It's not an easy thing to be in. You take a lot of heat. I personally don't know it, but I can tell just from watching all sides. Why you and why now coming back into it?
Yeah, look, that's a great question. I am lucky enough to be a born and raised San Francisco kid. To your point, I'm super blessed with my family. My wife Liz and I are raising our 3 children here. I should say our oldest is actually a freshman in college, our daughter, which is really crazy to actually continue to mention. She's been there about 6 weeks in Boston. And we have 2 boys here at home, one a junior in high school, one a 6th grader, and been blessed with my career outside of City Hall. For those of your listeners, my career outside of City Hall, which has been the vast majority of my life, is started as an attorney in Silicon Valley at a law firm called Wilson Sonsini, and then became an investment banker in San Francisco, and then started an investment firm in 2009 in the city and been running that ever since with my partners. And, super blessed in the private sector. And for me, though, running for office in San Francisco, aside from my family, there's no other greater cause that I will fight for than my hometown. And I believe in our city. I believe we are that iconic city in the world that, represents so much in terms of, obviously, like I said, our physical beauty, innovation capital of the world when I left office in terms of technology and the business community. Obviously, we have a spirit and an ethos about us that is unique around the world, of inclusivity, of accepting people. As someone who was lucky enough to grow up here, look, I didn't realize how special it was until I went to college. But I grew up with friends of every race, every ethnicity, every religion. I'm a born and raised Catholic kid. I went to bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs all the time. Celebrated Diwali in school. Had parents come in and talk about Ramadan. That's amazing. And I think the biggest gift we're actually giving to our children is having them being raised here as well in that similar kind of open environment. And I think real citizens of the world. But to me, this is a city worth fighting for. And, as we've talked a little bit earlier, we still have everything going for us, except these core issues and this lack of leadership inside of City Hall. And having been mayor before, knowing what the power of the mayor's office is, what the mayor can do with that role, it's incredibly frustrating to watch it unfold the way it has over the past few years. I never wanted to get back into politics, ever. Again, super blessed with my career in the private sector, super blessed with my family. But I felt compelled because our city is headed in a direction, and I don't believe we can afford 4 more years of the same administration. And I believe we need someone to come in and hit the ground running on day one and start to make a difference in everyone's lives. So to me, experience really does matter. The next mayor is going to inherit a $16 billion budget, approximately over 35,000 city employees, over 50 direct department head reports. Experience is relevant.
I agree. I agree to that.
Adds competence and a strong vision for our city. So that's why I decided to get back in that, because I believe I can deliver on that promise.
I think to your point also is, I do like to see when in such positions, you have to have some type of experience in the business sector, whether you own your own company or whether you're partnered with people and so forth. And I'm glad you have that, because it's not, you're making decisions, and these decisions are affecting people's lives the same way you would in a company that's a decent size, where you have employees and they have families and so forth. And without that experience, I'm not sure London Breed's experience in that regard. I haven't heard good things, but that helps. That helps as leadership. That helps to move things forward, to fight the challenges that come up, to work with people. That's a big one, right? Because you're in such a diverse area with different thinkers and different ideologists and idea thinkers that you have to work around that, and having your experiences is going to help. We've addressed a lot of key issues here. One thing we didn't talk about yet is the housing. Housing in San Francisco, although I've seen it go up and down depending on which neighborhood. Overall, we were, I would say, the leader in investor housing markets. Now, for renting, it's a different perspective, of course, because there's so many renters here and it's expensive. How can we continue to maintain the value of properties for people that are investing in the San Francisco market, but at the same time give people an opportunity to be able to afford living in such a city that's beautiful and was beautiful and can be beautiful again? I still think it's beautiful with those minor few flaws that we've addressed on this podcast.
Yeah. No, look, great question. Housing's, always incredibly important in San Francisco, always been a very expensive place to live. So what do we do about it? One, I will tell you what we should not do is expand, as one of my, kind of competitors for this office is articulating, expanding rent control to every unit in San Francisco. To me, as you think about disincentivizing upkeep of existing units, disincentivizing new building in San Francisco, that would be disastrous policy for our city. We're not going to get rid of rent control for the existing units that are protected, nor should we necessarily, but expanding it makes no sense at all. I think would be disastrous for the rental market, for the home ownership market in our city. For me, we need to just build more housing in San Francisco. We're under a state mandate to build about 10,000 units a year right now. To set the context, last year we built 2,000 units. This year we're going to build on pace about 400. And as of about 2 months ago, year to date, the planning department had approved 16 new units inside of City Hall. So we're totally failing in building enough housing. And to me, the benefit of building more housing is more housing. Supply demand. We want more units in the city, but we want to lower the cost of housing for everybody. And from my perspective, look, my daughter's a freshman in college. My biggest dream is that 4 years from now, she moves back to San Francisco. But in order for that to happen, our city has to change in a number of ways in terms of safety and economic opportunities, but housing has to be, front and center on that, because it's the biggest sticker shock, certainly for young grads coming to our city. So, building new housing is talking about zoning, it talks about legislation, and then there's about mayoral directives to our planning department to make it more streamlined within our planning department. But the reality is right now, as an example, I'm happy to talk through any of these sub-issues with you. We have over 35,000 units that have been approved that are sitting there not being built because the investors in these units or in these projects, even though obviously you pay a lot of money to get fully entitled projects in San Francisco and multiple years off in the case, if they don't pencil out anymore, if they break ground, they're going to lose money because of the anticipated drop in rental prices because of all the safety and other issues that we were having as a city. So they're putting their equity elsewhere in different jurisdictions in the U.S. And that should not be viewed as a sense of pride from us, but a sense of, oh my gosh, this is the easiest low-hanging fruit. Let's go back to these developers, not to give developer giveaways, but to economically incent them to start building in our city. We can get our building and construction crews and our union members back to work. And then we can build for the future as well. And that, to me, has to be the policy priority out of City Hall. Again, big talk, this YIMBY-NIMBY dialogue has been happening in San Francisco. I don't believe it's helpful at all. We need to do better.
I completely agree with that part is, hey, you want them here. It sounds like all these developers are bad. They're taking advantage. But no, they provide jobs. They provide places to live. And the same thing with the companies. When the policies are not good. Companies leave, people lose the job, they can't afford rent again in some way. Or why have another city thrive off the mistakes that San Francisco is making? We should be doing everything possible to keep those companies here, to keep development happening, and keeping the pendulum swinging in our way, in our favor, versus pushing them out and pushing everybody out, where then you're kind of retracting and realizing, oh no, we made a mistake. All right. Well, I think we've talked quite a lot about pretty much the core issues here with everything that's been happening in San Francisco. Let's talk a little bit about yourself. You're a busy man. What do you do aside from, I know your daughter just went to college, and I'm sure you shed a couple tears because time flies. What do you do for fun, Mark? What do you do to keep yourself going, to keep a positive mindset? What do you do to keep yourself motivated is what I want to know.
Yeah, look, a lot of different questions within there. I think to keep motivated, just knowing what we're fighting for, the future of San Francisco. And like I said, to me, lucky enough to be born and raised here, this is home. And to me, fighting for the future, and a future that I think not only I believe in, my supporters believe in, but really I think the rest of the world will embrace in San Francisco, and really kind of restore our city to that iconic city in the world, is worth fighting for, and keeps me motivated for sure, because this is silly season, right in the campaign cycle. Opponent spending, over $10 million of inherited wealth attacking me. Look, good luck with that. At the end of the day, again, I believe my vision and experience will come through at the ballot box. In terms of fun, I'm an active dad. I mean, if you know me at all, I'm a dad of 3 kids. I mean, that is what drives me, and that is what I love to spend my time doing. So with our daughter off in college, we actually did get to go back to Parents Weekend the other week and visit her, which was amazing, in Boston, and see her again because we miss her so much. But our 2 boys, they're in football season right now, so we're going to a lot of games. I can't coach right now. I love coaching our kids' teams. But with this campaign, that's just not practical. But otherwise, literally, when the spare time that I do have, which is just quite frankly right now, not very real, but using everything that we have to offer in San Francisco and going exploring, hiking, running, walking. I'm a big guy at the gym. Again, with the campaign, it's happening less and less. So I just go for walks with the dog in the Presidio, Land's End, McLaren Park, different parts of San Francisco. We have an amazing city in so many different neighborhoods that people don't actually get to explore very often. And I think it's worth doing, because I think your appreciation for the city will really increase when you realize everything in so many different neighborhoods that offer so many unique things to the residents of our city.
I love that. Yeah, I tell my wife sometimes, let's staycation, and every time we do, we go, wow, this is nice. So incredible. Final question for you, Mark, and I truly appreciate your time. I know how busy you are. I see you out there. By the way, I will commend you. You're shaking hands out there. I just saw an Instagram post. You were in the Castro. You're in different neighborhoods, getting different perspective from individuals that are of all descents, all over the areas. And that's pretty cool. I haven't seen many people do that in your position, and that's I applaud that, and I think a lot of people will do that in the ballot boxes. Last question: if you could go back in time and see yourself any point in time, what piece of advice would you give yourself as a younger man, and what would that be?
Ooh, that's a great question. You know what? I think going back to my younger self when I was in grad school, in law school, and, I came out of law school with debt, had to take out loans to do it. And it was practical. You have to think about making money and paying off your debt and building a future for yourself. But I think really following your passion, because I think if you follow your passion and what you're really interested in, money will follow, success will follow in whatever form or shape that takes. I think one of my career jumps was based upon money rather than kind of a passion for that. I don't regret it at all, but I think to me, and that's certainly what we talk to our kids about, is following your passion, whatever that may be. Whether you want to be an artist, whether you want to be in finance, whether you want to be an athlete, whatever it is, to me, following that passion, and I think success will follow. And I also think then you'll never think about going to work. You're just living your life. And I think that's an awesome life well lived.
Thank you for sharing that, Mark. There you have it, guys. 1 hour with hopefully the future mayor of San Francisco, Mark Farrell. I appreciate you coming on, Mark. It's been truly a great hour. I hope you win. I really hope you change the city and move it forward to where it could be. I do see it happening in the future. So just don't forget about this podcast, and you're welcome to come back on anytime. We can review anything that you want to talk about or the changes that you have done.
Well, I look forward to it. And listen, thanks for having me on. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I certainly tell your listeners, please get out there and vote. Hopefully vote for Mark Farrell for mayor, and let's make a difference together.
Absolutely. You have my vote, and hopefully everybody else that's listening. Mark really wants to make change happen. He really wants the city to thrive. He respects the police, as what we've talked about. There are problems in San Francisco, and he will address those problems. You heard it here. So thank you, Mark. Thank you, and good luck to you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye-bye.